Welcome to another edition of The Road To. We are here today to discuss the upcoming elections for state offices in November. And we are fortunate to have two candidates for the House of Delegates with us. But before we get to them, I'm Patty Morrissey, your host. And excuse me, I have a little allergy cold. And we're going to introduce our pundits, Mike Lane and Phyllis Randall, and let them give us a little background on themselves.
Patty, good morning. Thank you for having me back one more time. Always a pleasure. As our regular viewers might remember, I started off in Arlington County. I was once upon a time sentenced as an elected Republican to the Arlington County Board, the only elected Republican in Arlington in the last 44 years. From there on, I went on to party chairman, including 8th District Party chairman, and now I spend my time trying to get Republican candidates elected to public office.
Okie dokie. Phyllis Randall, my friend.
Thank you for having me again, and welcome back, Mike. I haven't seen you in a long time. Of course, I have two kids who are graduates of, one graduate of Loudoun County Public School. I'm a political community advocate and very, very involved in education. I'm currently the vice chairperson of the Virginia's Fair Housing Board. I was appointed by Governor Tim Kaine and then retained by Governor Bob McDonnell. I'm happy to be here and look forward to today's show.
All right, thanks, Phyllis. We have a candidate who recently joined as a candidate who you've seen on the show before, Liz Miller, and we're going to let her tell the candidate side of her story.
I am running for the 32nd House of Delegates because I heard that nobody had stepped up, and nobody stepped up against this particular incumbent last time, and he has a 0 score with my organization, NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia, and I could not let him get another free pass. Okay. So I stepped up, and I'm going to make sure that everybody knows that he voted for the transvaginal ultrasound bill, and that he voted for fetal personhood, and that I will focus on transportation, on fairness, on tax fairness, and on all of the things that get our economy moving, and leave your bedrooms out of it.
Okay. Thanks, Liz. And first time guest here, Herb Kemp, is running for, is it the
86th
in a primary.
Right.
But I'll let you introduce yourself to the crowd.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks, Patty. So yeah, this is my first time, first foray into politics, at least as a candidate. But it's not my first time in public service. I spent the first 3 decades of my life, 28 years to be specific, as an Air Force officer, retired in 2001. I've worked in the defense industry for ever since then as an executive in 2 different firms in this area, and I now have my own management consulting firm. And I made a decision to step back into politics, frankly, during the course of working on the Obama campaign last year. And I realized that a lot of the issues that motivated us to work on that campaign have their manifestations at the state level. Yeah. And it was probably time for me to get back off the sidelines and try to work firsthand on some of the issues that I cared about. And so for me, that comes down to 2 things. And one is taking an evidence-based approach to solving some of the problems that we're trying to work, transportation and energy and so on and so forth, and pushing back on what I see as infringements on civil liberties with voter suppression and some of the issues that she mentioned. So that's why I'm here.
All right, great. Great to have you. So speaking of issues, some of the issues that are reoccurring time and time again have been moved forward on the Hill. Specifically, immigration is moving around. I'm not sure where it is right now, so you guys probably have to fill me in. But that and gun control were the 2 issues that we were going to discuss, and take your pick. But the relationship to state and how the state governs and how the state's input to either progress or lack thereof in those issues. Mike, why don't we start with you?
Well, I'll kick off the immigration part of it. I think where we are is static. Right now we have nothing happening because, if you can believe Democratic Senator Bob Menendez from New Jersey, who was part of the Gang of 8, the votes aren't there in the Senate. And
can you let everybody know the Gang of 8?
The Gang of 8,
thrown around a lot. But
the Gang of 8 was the bipartisan group that got together. Highest profile members on the Republican and Democratic side were Republican Marco Rubio and Democrat Chuck Schumer, and they had 6 co-senators with them. But they put together a deal that can't pass the Senate the way it is. But their deal with each other was that they would resist any modifications of it in order to keep their deal intact. So we're sort of dead in the water. The issues, as I see it, are that Republicans always wanted border security first, and they would come back and address anything else after they got border security. The Democrats never really were interested in border security. They wanted to have all the other things done. They put together a comprehensive bill that the Gang of Eight said would work, but on the Republican side, there is doubt that there really is any border security as part of the comprehensive bill, especially in light of Secretary Napolitano's testimony on the Hill about 3 weeks ago, that as far as she's concerned, the border is already secure and that, all the triggers in the bill have already been met. I think that really took a lot of the wind out of the whole thing.
The progress on border security factually has been significant. I don't know if you can make it airtight without an electric fence.
I think, can I jump in here?
Yeah,
Sorry, this is an issue I feel a little bit of passion about.
Okay.
It's a false premise that we have to resolve all the border security issues first before we do anything else about immigration. That is a recipe for doing nothing, because I would submit for a lot of Republicans, border security will never be tight enough in order to justify moving to the next step. So I would certainly agree that we need a less porous border for many reasons, not simply illegal immigration. But having said that, we should not put off badly needed reforms on immigration in this country. And the fact that we have so many undocumented people here, the fact that they continue to come, says that there's both opportunity and there is at the same time a very broken immigration system.
I think also that there's a whole lot of corporate incentive to continue to have the immigration policies that we've got, because farm workers and whatnot can, be encouraged to come here to get higher wages than they would get in their home countries. However, they're still being paid below minimum wage and are abused and kept in substandard conditions and things like that, because they're afraid to go to the police to complain, and they don't have any foundation to complain with. They're afraid to be deported and things like that. And I think it's just actually.
I think we all realize how messed up it is. Phyllis, go ahead.
I think inserting some facts into what Mike said might be helpful. The fact is that at this point, under President Obama, people who are coming across the borders illegally is almost at a net zero. So the issue of border security actually has been dealt with, and the Republicans have been screaming about this for years. And one thing that many Democrats, when President Obama was running, had issue with was that he said he was going to deal with the illegal immigration issue as far as people coming across the border, and he has. Mr. Kemper's right. There is, we can't say that no one will ever come over the border illegally. And the fact is, the Republicans don't really want to deal with this issue. Of course, the issue was put forward by Republican Senator Marco Rubio from Florida. And it's not that there's not enough votes in the Senate, because if it was a simple majority vote, it would pass. There's not enough votes to stop cloture, because Republicans don't want to vote for it no matter what happens as far as security issues are concerned. They just don't. They just don't want to vote for things like the DREAM Act, which says if you were brought here as a child by your parents, by no means of your own, and you are in high school, in college, in the military, you can't become an American citizen. Some of these things are common sense reforms that need to happen, and it's not even something that's about border security anymore. That is a red herring the Republicans have put out there because they do not want to address the issue of border security, and mostly because they think if they do address it, they're going to have a primary from their right.
Let's talk about how this is going to.
We'll continue to disagree. I think border security is exactly the issue, but
Okay.
I understand.
Mike, let's talk about how this, and candidates, how this is affected or percolating at the state level. Is this going to be part of the debate, and is this an issue that's going to come up on the campaign trail?
It remains to be seen how much of a hot issue it actually becomes on the campaign trail. But if we look at some of the data from the Commonwealth Institute, for example, there are between 250,000, maybe 300,000 undocumented workers in the state of Virginia today.
Okay.
They contribute something on the order of $2.5 to $3 billion annually to this economy. Most of them actually do pay taxes, as it turns out, and you go to the Social Security Administration actuary for that. Roughly 2/3 of undocumented workers actually pay taxes of one kind or another, typically through a tax ID or whatever. So it's a question as to how much of an economic burden it actually represents. What it does tell us, though, is that there is gainful employment for the people who come here. They frankly, in most cases, don't use, they can't use a lot of the social services that their taxes pay for because they have no legal presence. So I think we need to improve our stance in immigration for a number of reasons. One of those is purely economic, frankly. We frankly need immigration to continue our growth as a nation. If you and I would like to have more taxpayers to pay for our Medicare and our Social Security as we get older, we need to continue to grow. And based on our birth rates, we're not doing that. 11 million people are not going to self-deport. And we're not going to round them up and ship them off as much as some would like to. That's not a practical thing to do. So at the end of the day, we need to figure out how to solve this problem. I would point out that some of the immigration reforms that are being discussed right now were first articulated during Mr. Bush's administration.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so, and was shot down by extreme Republicans to his right at that time. So
Yeah.
I think it was shot down, Herb. To be fair, it was shot down by people who were more concerned about border security than was contained in the Bush bill.
Well,
Which
see,
is
I think-
exactly
I-
why
I- I- I
President
think the
Obama
real-
addressed border security.
There are some very good reasons for being concerned about border security. We want to make sure that drug traffickers don't get through. We'd like to make sure that terrorists can't get through and the criminals can't get through. If we have a legal path to immigration so that the only people who are trying to get through now are the drug smugglers and these terrorists, it's going to make it a lot easier to find them.
I agree with that. My grandparents came through Ellis Island, and if you kept your nose clean for 5 years, you became a citizen. That was how it worked when they came over. And things have changed periodically throughout the years, but at the moment, there is no equivalent to coming over and just keeping your nose clean and becoming a citizen for 5 years. It just doesn't happen. The waiting list to be sponsored and come over and become a citizen is outrageous. I use that word a lot. But it means that we're really missing out on people who want to come, who want to be good citizens, and who want to contribute. And we're instead encouraging them to come over illegally and mask the real criminals at the border.
We have this odd dichotomy in our country. We're a nation of immigrants, and every wave of immigrants seems to be intent on slamming the door shut as soon as they're inside the borders. And I think that's to our disadvantage. My ancestors on my father's side, at least, my mother was German, so she was first generation here. But on my father's side, his ancestors came to these shores in the colony of Georgia in the 1750s, and they were poor. They're probably indentured servants, and endured a journey of great hardship with a lot of unknowns. They put up with risk and danger, and they did it because they felt that there was a better life on the other side of that ocean than whatever they had back in England, and that they could make a life for themselves in there. So they were willing to run those hardships and those risks, and they had a lot of drive to do it. And that's what we call the American story. Now, the same thing that compelled them, excuse me.
They did it legally, though, didn't they?
Well, there wasn't a legal or illegal. To talk to the Native Americans, they might have said that was illegal immigration at the
All right,
time.
well, that's your heresy.
Okay, but at the same time, okay, my point is that it's drive that pushes people to come to this country. It's drive, and we might say this person came here illegally, but at the same time, why would we not want to find a way to reform our laws to capture that drive, that energy, that creativity, make it part of our society? That's the key point here. The point is, I understand.
I think we do. I think we're onto. I think we want to do that, but we want to ensure that the borders are secure. And the current proposal from the Gang of Eight does not do that.
You're not going to have a secure border. You're not going to have a secure border if you don't give an easy and valid path for people to come over that doesn't involve climbing over hurdles that make crossing the Sonora Desert look easy.
Well, and the other thing is, I mean, we continue to have this conversation as if the fact that the people coming across the border illegally is almost at a net zero, guys. I mean,
Yeah.
and I think that the bigger discussion may need to be, what do we do with people who are already here undocumented? And I will say again, especially the kids from the Dream Act kids who were brought over here, and this is their country. This is the only country they've ever known. They came here when they were 3, 4, 5, and so we can have this discussion about, you know, if people are coming over the border right now, but we know that those numbers have dropped almost down to nothing. What do we do about people who are here already? That's the real discussion. And we're right. Unlike Mitt Romney said, people are not going to self-deport. This is their homes at this point. So how do we get them on a path to citizenship? That's the question we need to have discussion of. And the Gang of Eight wasn't willing to have that kind of common sense discussion. The fact that they would be willing to deport somebody who's been here since they were 3 years old and is serving in the military and is going to college is completely nonsensical and does take away from moving our country forward.
Except we don't deport those people. I mean, law may provide for it, but we don't do it. So
we do.
I mean, we don't actually.
Or maybe we don't do it enough.
Somebody who served honorably in the military and
There
gets out.
there-
Show me one.
There are.
But we also don't figure out how to give them an easy path to citizenship.
But
we may not
let's-
deport them, but
Well, I
we
don't want to give
rid of
anybody
them.
an easy path
Well,
to
but if they
citizenship.
came over here when they were 3, I do.
I want to-
to
no.
give them an easy
No,
path to
I
citizenship.
want everyone who's not a
So guys,
citizen
I
to
don't know
show
if
that
we're
they
gonna
want to be a
answer
citizen and
ludicrous.
I don't
demonstrate
know if
that.
we're going to come up with the answer to immigration right now. I kind of want to get to another issue that may be a little bit more state. How is our state going to deal with this? And that's gun control. We've got things going on at the federal level that seem to be hitting a wall or have hit a wall. Are there things we should be doing at the state level?
Absolutely. There are.
He's a really opinionated candidate, which is good.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
You got there right before me.
You shouldn't run if you're not passionate about it. You know?
Right.
And let me start by saying I support Second Amendment rights to own weapons for self-defense. That is clear. That's unequivocal. The courts have ruled on that, and so that's not the issue. The real issue is what kinds of weapons can people have, who can have them, and where can they take them? And I think those are the issues that are currently being discussed.
I feel like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt here, but I feel like the only people who should not have guns are felons and people who have severe mental illness. And a simple background check is so easy to implement for just to make sure that guns are not getting into the hands of people who really should not have them.
You're talking about violent felons.
Yes.
Not nonviolent felons.
Yes.
So nonviolent felons should have their gun rights restored.
Yes.
Yes.
If a felon is somebody, you can be somebody who at age 19 shoplifted something that was $201. At that point, you're a felon. You've done your time, you've paid your restitution, you've done all the things you should have done. If you are now 45 years old and you shoplifted when you were 19 years old,
Okay.
I'm
on your team on that. You agree?
I would like to actually.
Should nonviolent felons have gun rights restored?
I would actually like to.
You say you're on my team on that one?
Yeah, I'm on.
Wow.
I would actually like to just say that I think that there should be hoops to jump through. If you have a felony conviction, and if it was even if it was nonviolent, that I think that you should have to be able to prove that you are eligible to own a gun.
I disagree with that.
But mostly because, again, I own some guns, and I do like to shoot, but I've also been on the other end of a gun 3 times. And I don't know that the people who held guns had felony convictions. I don't know if they had those guns legally. All I know is the guns were pointed at me. And I would like to
Well, that's a crime in itself, presumably. I mean, brandishing is a crime. If they didn't have cause to do it, they should be arrested and prosecuted for that.
So I would like to I'm not saying make it impossible. I'm saying let's examine.
You say you have something to prove, essentially, before you can have a weapon. You know, there's only in 2 parts. with respect to people coming out of prison, irrespective of the crime. I think one of the things society has to do is return that person to full citizenship to the extent possible. So voting rights would be another area, for example. We're one of only 4 states that doesn't do it right now. Because what you don't want to do is stigmatize someone for life so that they simply cannot get back into society. Now, how that applies to guns is obviously a little more nuanced question. A person with a violent history, frankly, shouldn't be on that list. I think to your case, that could be considered. Maybe there's a way you have to go through that. But I think the general principle that we're talking about here is that people with a propensity to commit a crime are people that we don't want to have guns. And if they have a history either through mental illness or previous criminal behavior, clearly they should be on a restricted list of some kind. So, I thought that was going to pass the Senate. Universal background checks. It came apart. I'm not sure that the votes are going to be there. I think it is, if of all the things that we possibly could do, it is, I think, the single most important thing that we can do. One of the things that I see very frequently happening in this discussion is that someone who preferred to see no further legislation with respect to guns will always come back and say, well, that particular piece of legislation would not have prevented that particular
that's
crime,
ridiculous.
which is a false herring. It's a red herring to throw in there because it would prevent some crimes. We have to reconcile ourselves to the fact that there will always be gun-based crimes in this country. We have a lot of guns. It's going to be there, and you have to deal with it. But we can reduce the amount of gun violence, and that's where we have
Let
to
me
go.
ask
I
a related
also-
question, though, because I want to kind of push it out a little bit, because
Yeah.
you just mentioned certain types of crimes. And Phyllis is a mental health professional.
Who works in a jail?
So one of the things, and this goes to the
works
state,
in a jail?
this goes to what can the state do to
Yeah.
provide, right? So I think that the focus on universal background checks, whatever, we got caught up in gun control again. But we really have not addressed mental health, which is in very short supply. And I just wanted, Phyllis, you've experienced, you've been in that world for how many years? So
Many. Enough.
what can we do, and this goes back to our candidates, what can we do at the state level that we're not doing in that area?
Well, these two issues are connected, yet they're not always connected. We actually have to put more effort, time, and yes, money into serving people who have mental health issues and stop stigmatizing people who have mental health issues. If you look at the DSM is that thick, and people think of mental health issues as somebody who is somebody that somebody would call
What's a DSM?
crazy. I'm sorry, the Diagnostic
Diagnostic.
Statistical Manual. It's the Bible for diagnosing mental health conditions. So there are literally hundreds of mental health conditions, and not all of those conditions should be something that we talk about when we talk about gun safety or gun rights. Sleep disorder is a mental health condition, but the ones that actually may lead to violence, people who have antisocial personality disorder certainly shouldn't have guns and things like that. But what we've done over the last many years, both in this state and nationwide, is whenever we have budget cuts, we cut prevention services and we cut mental health services. And then we're surprised when somebody who has a mental health disorder grabs a gun and goes shooting up places. And so we do need to have a background check for mental health issues for a person who has mental health disorders, like the person, of course, who was at Virginia Tech.
Yes.
But we also need to have more services put into mental health services anyway, and not to assume that people who, if you take money out, the issue goes away. It doesn't go away. I work in a jail, and
Loudoun County?
no, and I'm not going to say the jail I work in because that wouldn't be appropriate. But but I work in a jail. But I would venture to say that over 60% of my substance abusing clients also have other mental health issues. And just on a side note, I asked my clients in the room, it was 30 male clients in a room. I asked them a question the other day. I said, how many of you graduated from high school? And about 4 or 5 raised their hand. And I said, how many of you have been shot or shot at? And all but 3 raised their hands. How many of you have guns or have had guns? Every person in the room raised their hand. So the fact that we would not have background checks for people who have mental health issues, substance abuse issues, and a criminal history is insane.
I worked, I was on the board for
2 minutes, guys.
4 years of the Loudoun County Community Services Board, and also served on the Virginia Association of Community Services Boards. And I was extremely upset when Loudoun County board, the current board, cut all the funding for the drug court, because the drug court is one of the most successful ways of keeping nonviolent offenders to make sure that they stay nonviolent, to keep them out of prison.
It's
and to
prevention. The
and
drug
it's
court's prevention.
And it worked. It really worked. And they took the money away, and now they're spending money on keeping those people in prison.
And that's the thing, you're going to
Let's let
spend it
Herb
one
get in
place
right
or the
now.
other.
We got to go to
anyway.
break in a second, but
Okay.
let's let Herb tell us about how this relates to his future job.
Well, it remains, the voters have to make that decision first, but I'll be
Right.
happy to go with it. I recall that there was at least one bill in the legislature this year that was a Republican-based bill. It didn't go anywhere, but it essentially would have made it a crime for any Virginia state employee to cooperate with the federal government on any matter which they believed infringed upon gun rights in this state. It didn't get voted on, or at least it didn't pass. And that's kind of over the cliff, I think. There's the important thing to remember about the discussions we're having on some of the different measures that might be served under reducing gun violence are things that are consistent with the Supreme Court decisions of 2008, as explained by Justice Scalia, arguably the most conservative justice on the court.
Yeah. We got to go for a quick public service announcement, but we'll be back in a few minutes to talk more on the road too.
Events of September 11th, there have been hundreds
Sorry,
of
it was-
violent attacks against innocent Americans.
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for. Remember, please stop the hate.
We're stronger when we are united.
Remember,
Remember what that flag you're waving stands for. One nation,
Under God.
Indivisible.
with liberty
And justice.
for all.
in America, there's either room for everyone or it's not America.
Don't pick the wrong fight.
Let's keep America land of the free.
Stop the hate.
You'd never know it on the battlefield. But nearly half of today's military are National Guard and reservists. However, they can't answer our nation's call without their employer's support. If you're an employer, visit esgr.org and find out how to do your part. After all, their response depends on yours.
This is Mommy's bed. Me and Jenny were jumping on it. Mommy's gun fell on the floor. I was a cowboy. Bang, 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 bang. I said, Jenny, wake up, it's just pretend. But she wouldn't wake up.
I am sick of this. I'm sick of dealing with you. I'm sick of.
I work 6 days a week.
Who
do you think you
Stand up
are?
straight.
Don't you ever talk back to me again! You just shut up!
What are you crying about?
What a child learns about violence, a child learns for life. Teach carefully. We can show you how. Act Against Violence. Call 877-ACT-WISE for a free brochure.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promised.
Okay, hon.
Sweetheart, smoke outside now. You promised.
What kind of man are you? I'm a father. Look here, my father was a father, and he smoked his brains out in the house.
Watch as he blows those smoke rings on my little red face.
You probably have asthma.
Asthma? Schmasma. I'm telling you, nothing's gonna happen to your kids.
Don't swear when you're lying. You know very well that thousands of kids get bronchitis, ear infections, and even pneumonia from their parents' cigarette smoke. And didn't you promise your little angels you'd smoke outside?
Hey, Daddy.
Those little devils are just so sweet.
Do the right thing.
Please, smoke outside.
Until you can stop, go out for your kids.
Take the pledge. Call 1-800-513-1157.
As time flows on, there are places we return to again and again. Precious places. Timeless places. Places that, with your help, can endure forever. I'm Paul Newman. Help the Nature Conservancy save the last great places around the world.
submit. Welcome back to the Road 2. We're having a very lively conversation during the break. We apologize. And we wanted to shift gears just a little bit, really bring it more to the state level debates that have been going on, in particular over women's health care issues, or others call them other things. But I'm going to start with our women's health care expert, Liz Miller, because I'm sure she has something to say about this.
I do have something to say about this. I am passionate about women continuing to have the right to choose, that I really feel that every woman should be able to choose to what to do with a pregnancy if she finds herself pregnant. I also feel like every woman has a right to choose the timing of a pregnancy, to have the availability of birth control, to have the availability of good sex education. Prevention is so important. If you take a look at places where birth control is freely available and sex education is also freely available, you end up having a very much lowered abortion rate, because people who then get pregnant, the getting pregnant in the first place is far more of a choice. And also in places where there's parenting supports and maternity leave, paid maternity leave, and quality daycare at low cost, and quality health care at low cost. Those places also have very low abortion rates. And I really would like to focus on making sure that women do have the right to choose what to do with their pregnancies, for whatever reason, for their health, or because they are impoverished or something. But if you're impoverished and you can't face having a baby because having a baby is going to be too expensive, that's not really a choice either. That's something that's forced on you. And I would really love to complete the choice cycle and have people be able to make that
We'll come back
choice.
to what you could do in the House of Delegates related to that, but I want to get to Mike, because he's kind of been on the sidelines for a little while. And
Can we go back to mental health?
And because he has a "Don't tread on me" button, we want to
I'd
ask
like to
about.
abstain from this conversation, but
Can I interrupt just for a second? I do notice that you have, and
don't-
we've been talking about your "Don't Tread on Me"
Yeah.
button. I was going to get a "Don't Tread on Me" license plate with my womb as
Don't tread on my womb.
but it's already been taken.
okay. So, I mean, you don't have to comment if
No,
you...
I'm happy to comment. I think this is an issue on which most people have made up their minds, and it depends on where you're looking for it. A lot of times, to Liz's credit, she didn't say, we need to keep people out of your bedroom and stuff like that. That's a red herring. Nobody's going into anybody's bedroom. It's what happens after you've been in the bedroom that we're talking about.
No, there's some there's
people coming into
the
bedrooms.
issue is, if you become pregnant, do you look at it the way Liz just phrased it? What am I going to do with my pregnancy? Or do you look at it the way pro-life people look at it and say, what am I going to do with my child?
Pro-life until the baby is born.
That's the issue.
Cutting food
Is it a pregnancy?
sorry.
Is it something else? Is it some sort of pre-human life or something like that? Or is it a child? Is it human life?
Yeah.
If you believe it's human life, then you're pro-life. And I'm never going to see things Liz's way, and she doesn't believe it's human life, and she's never going to see things my way. And from the pro-life perspective, it's a child, it's not a choice.
But
Well,
from the
let's
profile,
hold on. We got only limited time, so let's let Herb get in
Can
here.
I please just interrupt?
We'll
just
get
one
back.
second?
Okay, 1 second. Go ahead. Sure.
Okay, because it's not pro-life if there's women who are suffering from lupus and can die because of the pregnancy, and their government says, no, you can't have an abortion.
And that's where we get to the legal part of
Right.
it.
Well, there's not much we can
Let's
do
let
about
Herb jump in
Guatemala.
here.
Let's just stick with
but that's the sort of law. The fetal personhood bill was the sort of law that could bring that here, and I'm
And
going
that's
to
where it
fight
goes
that.
to, okay.
So go on.
Very short answer in 2 points. Roe v. Wade, this is settled law, and I support it. The second thing I would say is that none of us has the wisdom to tell a woman what to do with her body. That's her decision, period.
Okay.
I want to say one thing, because there is one mistake you did make. Ken Cuccinelli has actually said he wants to make sodomy illegal, certain types of sexual behaviors between two consenting adults illegal.
And that's right.
It already
So
is,
that
though,
is,
right?
so it already is. He wants a kid. That is right in your bedroom.
He is seeking,
So
you know,
the idea that we don't want,
You know
the
what?
public party doesn't want to come into your bedroom
Yeah.
is completely
I
false.
think-
They
I
do
think-
want to come into.
I think
They may.
you-
I mean, seriously, I think Ken Cuccinelli will actually knock on your door and walk in there and say, "Hey, what's going on in here?"
I think
He
you're.
only wants.
Wag of
He
the
is seeking
finger.
Excuse my saying
He
it,
is
but
seeking
he only wants
reinstatement of an
PIV
18th century
sex,
sodomy law.
penis and
Yeah.
vagina sex, to be happening, and he doesn't want it to be
Yeah.
happening with birth control, and he doesn't want abortions, and he doesn't want to
Why-
pay for any social services after the baby's born. So that doesn't feel to me
May
like
I?
it's pro-life.
But I do find it interesting, and then I'll stop talking in just a moment. I find it interesting that the very same people who say they oppose abortion also oppose birth control, which would produce fewer abortions. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
All
I
right.
don't. I
Mike,
don't
could
get-
you explain that one?
I think that Phyllis has, my good friend Phyllis, has grossly misrepresented the Attorney General's position on this issue.
No, she hasn't.
You know,
Maybe in the knocking on the door
I,
thing.
I
but
believe.
Go ahead.
no, no. I believe this is settled law. That the Texas case, Livingston, whatever it was, settled this. There's no going back. It's done. What the Attorney General in Virginia was doing was to see if there might be a way to prosecute an adult who raped a minor in this situation, and would the anti-sodomy law provide a way of getting into the prosecution on that particular
That's
thing?
not- that wasn't
That
the
was
wording.
what that was
wasn't
all
the
about.
wording.
If you
That-
read the
I did,
Attorney
I
General's
did,
brief,
that was the
that's
wording.
what it's
I read
about.
the- that was the wording.
adult having sex with a child is already illegal. What is?
But there are higher penalties associated with the way it was written in the anti-sodomy law, and the Attorney General wanted to see this really bad adult rapist after a pedophile going after a child. He wanted to see him go to jail for a long time. And that's why he appealed that particular thing. And if you read the Attorney General's brief on it, that's what it says.
But Mike,
did read the brief. That's not how it's
unfortunately,
written.
and I don't disagree that you would want to take an individual like that and prosecute them to the fullest extent of the law. That was a dastardly thing for that person to have done. Having said that, the path that the Attorney General chose was to seek reinstatement of the entire statute, which includes, among other things, bans on cohabitation, as you noted, any kind of sexual act except coitus. So.
Well, let's just
that's
face
not-
it. Ken Cuccinelli has a very,
That's not how it was
very
written.
conservative social agenda
This
that
is-
does not
yeah.
comport with limited government.
That's
so,
my
I mean,
neutral
that is
moderator.
it's a fact. It's a fact.
And
so
I
it's
think
not-
you would be happy with that
And then
statement,
Open
actually.
Shane with the report your
Your
miscarriage
and
within
what
24
happened,
hours.
and report not only report your miscarriage, but actually report your
that about?
miscarriage and what happened to the fetus, which is the most.
So anytime you have a heavy
invasive-
period, you
Well,
have to bring the
I mean,
pad.
it's
in.
invasive. It's
We're getting
destructive. It's non.
sorry,
It is
it's really
non-feeling. It is. It is almost inhumane to ask a woman to not only she's dealing with the physical issues that a miscarriage might cause, the emotional issues that a miscarriage might cause, any spiritual issues that a miscarriage might cause, and then you have to go report it to the government and then tell them what happened to the fetus. That is actually inhumane. It really is. And what do you do when there's, I was at one point in my one pregnancy, I was carrying twins, and I lost one and kept the other. What happens in that situation? Do I go report I lost one and kept the? I mean, this is ridiculous. This is beyond being in my life. This is being in my soul. For God's sake, this is ridiculous.
And here's the other thing is that
I just gotta chill.
I'm so sorry about your loss, by the way. I just wanted to say that. But here's the other thing is that if you are sexually active, married, whatever, and not on birth control, every period that you get is could hypothetically be an early miscarriage. I mean, it's hypothetically it could be. It's not. It's not what most people think of.
Let's get
as a
back to what you could
miscarriage,
do
but it
as a
could be.
delegate to bring back some common sense here in terms of the laws.
In terms of the laws, I think that we can start with making sure that all outpatient surgical centers, such as gastroenterologists and things like that, are put on equal footing with abortion clinics which tend to actually have safer procedures than places like gastroenterologists. Most of the procedures.
The regulatory oversight?
Yes, regulatory oversight. I think we can say, if you wouldn't do it to a gastro, you're not going to do it to abortion clinics. I think that we can.
And the trend is in the opposite direction.
And the trend is in the opposite direction. I think also we can say that
the fetal personhood.
Fetal personhood is off the table because tablehood. I'm sorry, because I do value women's lives over the lives of potential persons. I don't believe that a 9-week-old fetus is a person any more than I think that an egg is a chicken. I just don't think that we can put them on the same platform together.
I also want to mention one other thing. Many years ago, Alma Powell, Colin Powell's wife, and I can't remember the other woman's name, a Republican woman, started a organization called Best Friends. And the organization actually went out to girls who lived in fairly impoverished neighborhoods and challenged them that had really high teen pregnancy rates, and challenged them, what can you do with your life so that you don't get pregnant? And it became a support system for these young ladies to be involved in all kinds of other extracurricular activities, be it academic, be it sports, be it community service. And it actually would almost run like an AA program, when you get in a situation where you feel pressure to have sex, with some little boys, some teenage boys telling you, if you do, you love me, you call somebody, figure out a way to get out of it. I do think often, if the pro-life and pro-choice movements put as much time and effort and energy and money into their cause, if we take that effort and put it into prevention and empowering young ladies to say no, and teaching young men that, hey, if the baby happens, it's your baby too, it would be a miraculous thing to happen. The idea that we put this much energy in after the fact and not put almost any energy in before the fact and building up our young ladies is, I think, a travesty to me. And I want to say that to their credit, it was 2 Republican women. I wish I could remember her name, but one was Alma Powell, who created the Best Friends program. And I think for the first 160 girls they took, I think something like 2 got pregnant, which was an amazing, tenfold improvement.
Good stat.
It's an amazing program. It should be given money to go nationwide, because I tell you what, it costs a lot less money to empower these young ladies to go to school and to be involved than it does to pay for their children, because they're not going to be able to afford them.
NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia has a really good program called CEDA now that we have in place in Petersburg, which is the highest pregnancy rate and highest teen pregnancy.
And by the way, the lowest graduation rate.
And the lowest, yes, and the highest sexually transmitted disease rate as well. And we're working with housing projects and stuff like that, going into housing projects and talking to parents and talking to kids, and talking about exactly that sort of mentorship and how do we prevent this epidemic of teen pregnancy.
And it's not a hard answer. We empower our young ladies. It's not a hard answer at all.
And also
it takes resource and commitment. But we have it. We have the resource. We have the commitment. It just seems to be aimed at the wrong places sometimes.
Is there a reason why it can't be done through the schools?
Yes, because the schools won't let them in.
You mentioned a key word, and that's resources. And I tend to think in terms of investments. And we have this odd thing going on where we are often unwilling to make the upfront investments to prevent problems from happening, but we're willing to deal with the societal consequences of that problem later on when it gets more expensive. Jesse Jackson
we do that in the world too.
Oh yeah, Jesse Jackson had a great phrase, and not association with this criminal activity, but it said, we can send a kid to the state pen or to Penn State. It costs about the same. What choice do we want to make? But when we get down to doing things like this in schools or in our societies to prevent manageable problems from becoming big problems, people push back and say, oh no, I don't want to invest in that right now.
Right.
And I don't want you to teach my
But
children.
we'll pay for all those
things.
prisons later, that's fine.
Yeah.
I think it really comes down to a matter of trust. You know, who are we going to trust women and their families to make decisions that are right for themselves and for their families? Or are we going to say, no, you got to do it this way? And personally, I vote for trust.
I don't think it comes. I think it comes down to much more than a matter of trust. I think it comes down to a matter of prevention, to education, to resources, to empowerment, and I don't think it's just a matter of trust, because I got to tell you, again, I worked with the mental health field, and I've had young ladies in my office with mental health issues who had no idea what to do once they were pregnant. But boy, they could have used some of those resources before they got pregnant. This is a very tough issue. And I'll say it one more time. The problem is so much of our effort and resources are put into what happens post-pregnancy versus how do you put those same resources so that you send somebody a different message and give them a different message about what they can do with their lives. It's a vicious circle.
Hey guys, we're going to transition a bit here so we have enough time to let our candidates tell us more about what they would like to accomplish if they are so honored to be sent to Richmond in a year, or less than a year.
Less than a year.
So let's start with you, Herb.
All right, and it would be an honor if I'm selected to do that. It wouldn't surprise you to know that I've knocked on thousands of doors since we've started this process, which means I've had a chance to talk to an awful lot of voters, and you have great conversations when you do that. And I hear two things from them. One are some of the things we've been talking about here, but they frankly would like to see people stop fighting the culture wars and focus on larger problems that affect us all. And the thing they tend to be most concerned about is job security so they can provide a good living for themselves and a future for their children. And to me, that means making sure that Northern Virginia, I can't isolate our district. Northern Virginia remains a good place to work and a good place to live, and a place that continues to attract and retain businesses with the kinds of high-paying jobs we'd like to do that. And that means we have to continue to invest. There's that word again, invest in appropriate infrastructure. We finally have a transportation bill, but the infrastructure goes well beyond that. And so we have to invest in those things, and we have to ensure that we're putting enough investment into our schools so we prepare our children for that 21st century economy.
Absolutely.
So those are our practical problems. We can have data-driven solutions to get ourselves there.
I feel like we really are putting the right resources, because I feel like our schools are getting there for like a small segment, like the Academy of Science, if you get to go to TJ. But in general, it just doesn't seem like they're really keeping up with what's required in the 21st century.
It's very different county to county, though. It's very different county to county.
It is.
But I mean, Loudon's a
Loudon
great
does very well, actually.
county, but I
Sure.
just don't think it goes far enough.
I think almost any educator would tell you they can use more resources, and if I were certainly advocating for a budget, I would always want to use more resources. We obviously have to temper that with realistic expectations of what we can afford, but I think our investments appear to be falling short from what people who are in education tell me today, and I listen a lot. My wife started out life as a teacher, by the way, and so in my discussions with her, with other colleagues, and that at a teacher level, I think they very often feel they are overburdened administratively, and that they don't have enough time and resources to actually teach. And so to the extent that we can improve their ability to do their jobs, that's a good thing. When I was in the military for all those years, when we would delegate a task to a commander to go do a job, you had to make sure that you gave that commander two things, and that's the authorities they needed to get their job done and the resources they needed to get their job done. Otherwise, you couldn't hold them accountable. So we're strong on trying to hold people accountable, but we haven't taken care of the other pieces of that, and I think we need to address some of those.
Okay.
Herb, if I may, one
Sure.
quick question.
Yep.
You mentioned that we need to put additional resources, particularly into education, but other things as well. From my perspective, shock, resources means tax increase. How much do we need to increase taxes to accomplish your agenda, and where are we going to get it from?
I couldn't put a number on it. I don't know enough right now. It's something that I would want to look at further.
And you're going to be shocked because I am the education person. It's not always just about increasing resources. If you look at Washington D.C., Washington D.C. pays more per pupil than any place in the country and has some of the lowest graduation rates. It's how those resources are allocated and if they're spent directly.
Yeah, but resources aren't just money, right?
I mean, correctly
and the quality of people
and wisely and exactly.
What I will say when it comes to resources, that there's. It wouldn't surprise you to know that I probably don't agree with Grover Norquist's views on this.
No, I'm not shocked.
No, I think we all want low taxes, but taxes need to be set at an appropriate level to pay for the things we need to pay for.
We do.
And we need to reduce them when we can. We have to have the stomach to increase them when we need to. Reagan certainly did it 7 times, I believe. So it's called realism. We are, by the last time I looked, the 8th wealthiest state in this country. And yet our teacher pay ranks 31st. Our state support to schools ranks 38th. I just think there's room for improvement there.
I agree with you on a lot of that. And I have a son in public school right now. He's graduating 5th grade next week.
Congratulations.
And thank you. And he's got a little presidential pin because he got good grades for the last 2 years. He's a straight A student, and that's terrific. However, I have spent a lot of time volunteering in his classrooms, and I see a lot of time spent towards prepping for SOLs. And it's
a travesty.
Right after the SOLs are over, it's party time at the schools.
It's a travesty.
In the high schools, I hear it's movies for the next month.
The SOLs are a travesty.
And
they're educational travesty.
I've taken a look at what they're testing on the SOLs.
It's
and
ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
It is.
It is not. It doesn't really seem to.
It doesn't teach in context.
No, and it doesn't seem to have any real thought about what they want the curriculum to do.
We do know that now, under President Obama, states can now opt out of SOLs if they want to. They have to have some other source there to show what these kids are learning and what they're doing, but states can opt out of SOLs. The other issue of SOLs is that they were talking about tying SOLs to teacher pay,
right?
Which is also ridiculous
because
they weren't. So you have a class, then the whole class is honor students. Well, that class may pass their SOL. You have a class and half the class is, ESL kids or kids who actually may be not eating a good breakfast and not doing as well. And they're not trying to figure those two things out, and they just the teachers are just based on who passes and who doesn't without any of the other factors put into that.
Also, my son's 5th grade teacher is terrific, but a lot of the things that Fortin's been tested on this year were things that he also learned in 4th and 3rd grade.
Sure.
Does it actually impact their pay? So it's not.
So you would support getting rid of SOLs?
I would support doing
heartbeat.
something that's more comprehensive, not.
So that would be something you would work on.
Not basically, not just one test, but maybe do portfolios.
And
things like that. Take a look at a holistic situation.
And actually have tests that are nationally normed. Each state under No Child Left Behind put their own testing in place. So the SOLs are not nationally normed. So we take the SOLs in Virginia and we can't compare the SOLs
on the other hand,
what's happening.
I don't really necessarily want Texas to be able to say
Texas shouldn't do anything. Have you seen their textbooks?
Guys, we just have a few minutes left,
Patty,
and I'd like
to say one thing about this education thing very quickly. There's an organization called Quality Counts that measures school outcome and things like that.
Yeah.
According to Quality Counts, Virginia has the 4th best schools in the country. So we're obviously doing 4th out of 51. We're obviously doing something very, very well, and I, don't think that we should. And part of that is the SOLs.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
We were 20 years ago when the SOLs came into
fruition.
fruition.
Didn't come into fruition 20 years ago.
If you take a
they
look,
came into fruition during the administration of George
Allen
back in the mid '90s.
But we got to get back to
between the areas of the state.
Liz, we got to get back to. I'm going to go back to her because he's in a primary, and I'd like you to have a little bit of time to explain differences between you and your primary opponent, or you and your general election opponent, whichever you choose, or both.
Let me just say, first of all, my primary opponent and I agreed at the start of this that we would run a very respectful campaign. We've done that and we intend to continue. It won't surprise you to know that our views on the issues are pretty close to each other. So now, having said that, let me just talk about why I think I'd be the better candidate to win this and to campaign against Tom Rust. Like him, I've got a very strong business background. I've been in executive leadership positions for most of my life, both as an Air Force officer, I was a commander. When I was in the Pentagon, I ran a portfolio of programs that was about $1.8 billion a year. I'm accustomed to dealing with big budgets, and I've been an executive with profit and loss responsibility in a couple of big companies. So that's the key quality that I bring into this race, and it's a transferable set of skills that can be applied to solving large, complex problems, hence my interest in working on things like energy, like transportation, which are large, complex systems. That's what I'm good at. That's what I think I can do to help the people of my district and help to sustain and continue to improve our economy.
Okay, well, if you come back later in the year, we'll get more into the energy.
All right.
That would be great.
I
Liz,
want to
go
be
ahead.
on that program.
I think the biggest difference between me and my opponent is that my opponent, when he ran...
Do you want to say his name? Or?
Tad Greason. My opponent, Tad
32nd
Greason.
District?
32nd District. I'm running in the 32nd District, which is most of Ashburn and some of Lansdowne.
All of Lansdowne.
All of Lansdowne?
No, all of
No,
Lansdowne.
because there's
west
that,
of Goose Creek.
Yeah,
Lansdowne,
there's that stretch that...
the Goose Creek stretch.
My opponent, Tad Greason, ran 4 years ago saying that he was going to be a moderate and also saying that he wasn't going to raise taxes. Quite frankly,
We're going to get cut off if you
okay.
don't.
So, and it turns out that in his voting record for the last 4 years, he has been anything but moderate. He's been an extreme conservative and very anti-choice and has a 0% score from NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia, and I'm running against him to get him out of there.
Okay. All right, thank you. And it was great having two of our House of Delegates candidates here and our usual pundits. And we hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll be back next month for another edition of The Road 2. Have a great weekend.